Typhoon Kajiki is rapidly intensifying on approach to Vietnam. Right now, currently a high-end Category 1 on the Typhoon Hurricane wind scale, and this could be increased to a Category 2 in the next few hours as it moves to the south of Hainan Island, once again rapidly intensifying here on approach to Vietnam here as it moves off towards the west. Right now, per our estimates, winds are 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour, and 1 minute sustained winds. Pressure 975 millibars and dropping, moving west at 12 miles per hour or 20 kilometers per hour. We are very high-end code orange on Ticos for the storm right now. So here's where the storm is located right now. If you're checking it at home, 17.3 degrees north, 110.9 degrees east, which is 198 miles away from Haikou, 198 also from Da Nang, 285 from Dong Hoi, 356 from Vinh, and 420 from Hanoi. Most of those being in Vietnam, but Haikou just to the north of the storm on the northern tip of Hainan Island. These locations are going to be impacted by the storm one way, shape, or form, whether it be by heavy rain, strong winds, or flash flooding. All of those threats on the card with the storm as it moves into Vietnam. Very large wind field has to be said for a South China Sea storm, although it isn't really monsoonal in nature, so of course it's not going against it. Monsoonal storms are of course much larger than this. No watches or warnings in effect right now in terms of what we know, although there is almost certainly some watches or warnings from the China meteorological agencies as well in Vietnam, probably due to this storm. So be sure to look at your local forecast office, whether that be from the Vietnam Weather Agency or in China, for the latest statements on watches and warnings regarding Kajiki. Regarding the rainfall threat, up to 450 to 500 millimeters of rainfall look likely in the landfall area and over Hainan Island in the path of Kajiki. These rainfall totals are very high and will lead to very serious flooding concerns. In addition to those flooding concerns, we could be seeing landslides as well in the mountainous areas. And with the storm undergoing rapid intensification right now, we are forecasting probably a Category 3 on the Typhoon Kajiki wind scale, making landfall here in about 24 hours from now. So time from that to prepare. And wind gusts in the eye wall of this storm could reach an excess of 130-140 miles per hour, leading to significant catastrophic damage in the landfall zone, especially the buildings not well built. So here is our latest forecast track that we're seeing right now. Winds at 90 miles per hour, going to rapidly increase here over the next 24 hours before landfall here, making landfall probably as a Category 3. We're forecasting 120 miles per hour, and then rapid weakening as it moves inland. And the remnants of it will be moving towards the Bay of Bengal, which some models suggest that there's maybe a 5% chance at max of redevelopment in the Bay of Bengal. I really don't think it'll amount to anything though, given that it is moving into or closer to September time frame here. So the latest GTWC's forecast calendar, they are forecasting a peak of 90 miles per hour just before landfall. Remains to be seen if it will get a little bit stronger than that. Of course, it probably is 90 miles per hour now. So GTWC are behind the curve on this storm right now. But as you can see, look at that weakening right as it moves inland, just dissipating just by 2 days from now. The storm is dead over Vietnam. So we'll have to wait and see how fast that storm dies. But the rainfall threat is going to come with it, even as a remnant low. So AMSU are behind the curve. Really, all satellite estimates behind the curve right now regarding the intensity estimates. Although Dvorak estimates performed by some of our analysts behind the scenes are supporting of this high intensity, and we're continuing to see the storm intensify. We'll have to wait and see on those satellite estimates and how they catch up regarding the storm, but the satellite appearance right now is wonderful. So here is a look at the GFS ensemble run. So you can see each of those lines is basically a individual run of the GFS. This is kind of how these battle runs work. You know, that they're ran a few times, and that's how we get these ensemble plots. You can see they are pretty much certain that the storm is going to track off towards the west, maybe a little bit of a northern components. Remains to be seen on how north the storm has gone. It has trended towards the southwest over the past 24 hours, especially over the last 12 hours, I should say, which has led to the landfall zone being shrunk a little bit more towards the south. But the storm has gone into more favorable conditions as it is now entering a phase of likely rapid intensification prior to landfall. Remains to be seen on how strong the storm will get, but you can see some of those model runs here are sustaining pressures in the 970s, maybe 960s even, which would lead to probably a Category 2, maybe even a Category 3 peak. The JMA, believe it or not, is forecasting a pressure peak of 950 millibars. That will probably be a high Category 3, maybe even a low Category 4. I don't think it'll get to that intensity, though. We're probably going to be seeing a Category 3 landfall. Vietnam has had some Category 3 landfalls in the past. Of course, last year it had Typhoon Kajiki, I believe, make landfall in the Gulf of Tonkin as a Category 4. So it remains to be seen on how strong this storm will get, but my bet right now is probably a Category 3. Here's a look at the Canadian model runs, the GEFS model run ensembles. You can see some members do take it into the Bay of Bengal with a very slight chance of development. We'll have to wait and see, though, if it doesn't really amount to anything. I don't think it will, given that the Bay of Bengal is pretty much in monsoonal season and is very unfavorable for tropical cyclone development. But most ensemble members here from both the GFS and the GEFS do kill the storm off relatively quickly prior to landfall. This model run here was taken a little bit over 12 hours ago, so of course the storm had turned it off towards the southwest from here. But a good look at what we were looking at maybe, say, 12 to 18 hours ago on what we were looking at the track and how it turned it off towards the southwest. Most model ensembles at that time were taking off the storm over southern Hainan Island, with a secondary peak potentially in the Gulf of Tonkin. Of course, that's not the case anymore, given that the storm had turned it off towards the southwest, and we're now going to be seeing a much higher peak density due to much favorable conditions underneath this storm right now. So moving on to the sea temperature plot, which we'll be moving on to here in a second. They are very warm underneath the storm. Here's the plot coming in now. Water temperature is very favorable underneath the storm for continued intensification all the way up to landfall in Vietnam. There are not going to be any issue at all for the storm right now, and I believe ocean heat content is piping hot underneath the storm. So it's got those waters to work with all the way up to landfall. Not really going to be seeing much stopping the storm from intensifying up until landfall. Maybe a little bit of land interaction in that last 6 hours or so up to landfall. Maybe a little bit of that, and maybe a little bit of shoaling as well. That's where those waters aren't as deep as it is underneath the storm right now. Looking at the surface observation plots, we've got a pressure of 1,002 millibars on the southern coast of Hainan Island, and associated with a typhoon. So it is suggesting that the storm might be a little bit more intense than what the JTWC is forecasting. They have it only as a minimal typhoon right now, I think, with a pressure of 985 millibars. I do think that it's probably a fair bit stronger than that the JTWC is estimating right now. So here's what we're looking at the model plots, courtesy of RAM. Most model runs taking it off towards the west, maybe with a little bit of a northerly component, as I said a few minutes ago. The HFS model run, interestingly, taking it into the Bay of Bengal. I really don't think it amounts to anything in the Bay of Bengal, of course, given that the Bay of Bengal is very unfavorable for any type of tropical cyclone development at this time of year, of course, given that it is monsoon season over there. The forecast remains to be seen. GFS does think that it might have a chance to get to Category 3 status, though most model runs are, of course, behind the curve on the intensification trend, hopelessly behind. You can see most model runs initiating pretty much 24 hours ago, initiating the storm as a minimal tropical storm. Wind shear is going to be probably a little bit lower than what we're seeing right now. So it has taken advantage of those lower amounts of wind shear, although it rises as it moves into Vietnam. But of course, that's not really going to matter, as the storm will be inland by then. Sea temperatures, as I said before, not going to be much of an issue. Relative humidity is going to climb, so that's going to help the storm right now. It is dealing with maybe a little bit of dry air right now, but I imagine with time it'll flush all that dry air out, and maybe the intensification rate might pick up a little bit even. Wow, we can see on that though. Radar imagery, or the satellite imagery side of things, looks pretty good. You can see that dry air slot that it is dealing with getting into the core. Maybe a little bit drier problems. I don't really think it's going to be too big of an issue. That these kind of storms deal with this kind of thing all the time. It'll probably flush out the dry air, and it'll probably make an eye appearance pretty soon. It's got those colder cloud tops on the southern side. That's where you're going to be seeing mainly the heavy rainfall threats with this storm. 450 to 500 millimeters of rainfall possible in those areas, over water and into Vietnam, as the storm moves inland here. So a very, 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 very significant flooding threat unfolding here over the next 24 to 48 hours. Maybe even a little bit beyond that for Vietnam here with Kajiki. I apologize. Visible imagery looks very, very, very good. Appearance of an eye there on visible imagery starting to appear. We'll have to wait and see if it gets better in the next few frames. I imagine it probably will over the next few hours. Radar imagery as well, depicting a very intense core here. You can see that eye depicting very well. No sign of an auto approach cycle just yet, as the core is still intensifying and still ramping up as it pushes off towards the west here. You can see in the beginning part of those frames, though, maybe even a little bit of a southward jog to that as well. But very cooler in those latest frames, turning off towards the west here, due west, towards the coast of Vietnam. Typhoon Kajiki, course set for Vietnam, probably making landfall in 24 hours as a Category 3.